everyone, welcome to another episode on season two of Path to the Pros. For those of you just tuning in, this is a podcast series where I sit down with some of the most talented and successful execs in sports entertainment, learning about their journeys so far, the path to success, and hot industry topics as well. Today I'm sat with Becky Kimbro, the Senior Vice President of Brand Engagement for the San Antonio Spurs. Becky, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good stuff. Like to kick off with a question. I always like to kick these things off with Becky. How did you first get into sports? Take us back to the start.
Yeah, it was a bit of a non-traditional path for me into this industry. I was spending the first probably 10 years of my career in the ad agency side. And the agency that I worked for had primarily political candidates as clients. So I spent a lot of time digging into voter strategy, voter messaging, and understanding how to target the right voter at the right time on the right channels. Um, I quickly realized that politics really wasn't as big of a passion for me as I thought it was. And for a lot of personal reasons, politics just wasn't really making me as happy as I needed it to be. So the Dallas Cowboys became a client of the agency where I worked. We did a fair amount of corporate work alongside the political stuff. And as soon as they became a client, I sort of had a light bulb go off in my head where I realized sports was actually the industry that I was acutely interested in working in. So I worked with the Cowboys on the client side for a couple of years and pestered them essentially to consider bringing on a marketing person, me, in-house. It was around the time that they were opening AT&T Stadium, then Cowboy Stadium, and they didn't really have anyone that was solely dedicated to marketing, which is incredible to think the size of the Cowboys brand. But they had never really had a need in the past prior to the opening of the stadium to really push brand marketing or even to try ticket sales and conversion performance marketing. So after, some back and forth with them over a couple of years, they indeed did extend me a offer to be full-time. And I worked there for a few years and all the while had been making some connections in the industry, had gotten to know some folks at the Texas Rangers, and they reached out when their VP of marketing role opened up. And I was fortunate enough to spend almost 7 years working for the Rangers in the lead marketing role.
Nice.
And then the role at the Spurs opened up about 5 years ago, and now I'm here and could not be happier.
Nice, love to hear it. Question I always like to ask again is I feel like sports is one of those industries where once you're involved and you're kind of in the weeds of it, so to speak, it's there are moments where you kind of realize and you look around and you say, hey, you know what, I've maybe not made it, but this is, living the dream, or this is exactly, what I signed up for and this is why I do this. When would you say was your first kind of pinch me moment where, you almost had to take a bit of a step back and just say, okay, wow, this is pretty fun?
Man, you're right, Samir. This is an industry where, for me, I feel like this happens every single day. And I also think that's like how I know that this industry is still where I belong. I truly do feel this every time I walk into work, or, even when I'm having a bad day, there's this realization that I still get to do something that is completely unique. It's genuinely fun. And at the end of the day, it matters to our community. And that to me is one of the most rewarding things about this job. I'll say, some personal highlights of those sort of pinch me moments for me. Early on in my tenure with the Rangers, they have a corporate softball tournament that they used to run at the end of every season. And everybody in the company is free to sign up for it. And at the time, Nolan Ryan was still our team president.
Right.
And I wound up on a softball team with Nolan Ryan. And I, despite my love for sports, am not a talented softball player. So I drove myself to the batting cages every day for like a week and a half leading up to this tournament because I was like, I am not going to be the weak link on Nolan Ryan's softball team. So that was playing softball with Nolan Ryan was a bit of a pinch me moment.
Yeah.
He was our pitcher. He did hit one of the batters on the opposing teams on accident with the ball. So that was like a really, really funny moment for all of us. Um, and here at the Spurs, I've had a million pinch me moments. We recently celebrated our 50th anniversary season, and we put on a game at
Congrats.
the Alamo Dome. Thank you. It was such a fun season of celebration. But we broke an NBA record for regular season attendance at the Alamo Dome, and standing in the middle of that arena with 68,300 people just locked in on this game was such a magical pinch me moment. Like, I had this moment in the beginning of the game. We did this light show where fans got their cell phones and they were putting their cell phones up and down with their flashlights, and the arena was lighting up just with all these flashlights. And I was standing there thinking, this is a pinch me moment. Like, this
Yeah.
is exactly the stuff that you do, why you do what you do, because you love those moments.
Yeah.
And I could go on and on and on telling ridiculous stories about my career. So you just have to tell me when to pause.
It's one of those. I just feel like I always love to hear those stories. Everyone's got their own kind of unique story. You very very rarely tend to hear the same thing by multiple people. But genuinely, I was getting a bit of kind of goosebumps and visualizing that whole moment of 50 years, 68,000 people. You stood in the middle of it. You're looking around, and the flashlights. Everyone's having such a great time. It's the reason that everyone signs up for it, right, and gets into the industry, because they want not to only create those memorable moments for everyone else, because that's obviously, I think, in my opinion anyway, the reason that a lot of people get into it in the first place. But you don't realize the memorable moments that then actually leads for you as as an executive industry, this a creator of moments, but also creating them for yourself as well. So always interesting to hear those. And I guess a question that I had for you, Becky, you've obviously worked with most of the major properties, I guess, in Texas. Have you found the kind of difference between, marketing in each organization, the kind of brand engagement within each organization? Do you find that there's a kind of similar trending pattern across, each fan base, or do you have to, really identify the differences between them and kind of speak to the audience?
That's a great question, Samir, and something I have had the good fortune of seeing several different organizations, and uniquely, I think, within the same state, but in different leagues. Certainly the NFL, and to be fair, I worked in the NFL over 10 years ago, so it's a very different sort of landscape and fan engagement
Yeah.
tactics that are used now. But certainly the NFL is a spectacle with only 8 or 9 home games every season. You are solely focused on that spectacle of 100+ thousand fans
Yeah.
8 or 9 times a year, and it's not really a lot of opportunity for creative or different or unique sort of in-game engagement, because you have so few games. You're just focused on sort of this idea of perfect execution,
Yeah.
and really, in a sense, less performance marketing, at least for the Cowboys at the time, because their season ticket base was really, really strong.
Right.
So
Right.
there was less sort of single game group type marketing. Looking at Major League Baseball with 162 regular season games, there is no shortage of opportunities
Yeah.
to try different things for each game, whether it be a different theme night or a different ticket sales promotion, or some sort of consistent ticket sales promotion throughout the season. You really are more focused on performance-based marketing than you are the brand side, just given the amount of inventory that you have to sell. And I think oftentimes that is to the detriment of baseball teams. I think focusing a bit more on brand marketing could be beneficial
Yeah.
for those teams, but it's just a matter of resources at some
Yeah.
point. And then I sort of joke, I'm like Goldilocks, like football was too few, baseball was too many, and basketball truly does feel right to me. It is the right number of games. And it's also, then you also look at different roster sizes, right? Like football has huge roster sizes.
Yeah.
Baseball's rosters are constantly shifting throughout the season, just based on need or injury. And basketball's roster sizes are much smaller. So we not only get an opportunity to try different things with our games and our performance marketing, but we also get to focus on brand marketing.
Yeah.
And because of the size of our rosters, we get a chance to really do some deeper dives into player stories
Yeah.
and sort of how those players build alongside of our team brand.
I just like to piggyback on that actually. How the industry's obviously evolved in all aspects, right? And multifaceted areas. Technology is obviously one, social media and I guess marketing in general has transformed immensely over the past decade. Just playing on that kind of player engagement and let's call it athlete engagement, how much of an impact do you think that I guess the development of social media has had on the way that fans are now able to kind of engage and interact with players?
It's changed everything.
Yeah,
And it has given fans an opportunity to connect on a one-to-one or seemingly one-to-one basis
yeah,
with their favorite athletes. And especially in this NIL era now, the athletes are themselves talented brand builders. By the time they get to teams, they already have very highly established and engaged brands and fan bases.
yeah,
So, it truly has changed everything about the way teams and athletes themselves interact with and engage with fans. It has also created an expectation that there is this constant engagement, which I think is largely a good thing. I also think there is some negativity that can come with that. Certainly, I myself and I tell my team, the comments are not where we spend our time. They
right.
are never read the comments.
Yeah,
They can be directionally helpful for understanding where fans are and what their sentiment is, but generally, a lot of times you don't find a lot of happy things there, and it
yeah.
can sort of create a negative impact on folks.
Yeah, for sure. It's not somewhere where you want to spend the most of your time anyway, as you're going about your posting. But also quite easy to kind of get trapped into it, right? Just interest, curiosity kicks in, and you want to know what's going on. But yeah, you're obviously saying and doing the right things there by investing in the kind of time and efforts into the right places that are really going to speak to the fans rather than fans' opinions, or in a lot of cases, probably not true fans that have those opinions.
Yeah,
Um,
I will also say too about social media. I think it's we're moving into this era where brands are realizing, at least team brands are realizing that social media, while an incredible engagement tool, in some ways is also we're basically renting our audiences to these platforms. So there is a big focus now on pushing first party data collection
yeah,
and on platform engagement, whether that be through team apps or team sites or team owned channels.
yeah,
Because, data privacy laws have changed and are continuing to change. And it becomes vital for us to build these one-to-one relationships with our fans and not rely too much on the social media platforms and channels to do that for us, because the reality is we don't actually own those audiences.
yeah. Yeah, it's always I think that the challenge that I guess just social media in general has is it's exactly that. That's one point, privacy. I think another large topic that is often discussed as well is, the personal lives of not just athletes, but people that are associated with these businesses, ownership groups, that anything that happens, and all it takes is one media outlet or one newspaper or one magazine um to share something or to leak something that could or couldn't be true. And all of a sudden there's backlash, there's too much going on in the kind of media for people to actually be able to put a button on it and try and put it to bed. Do you think, where do you kind of see the future there? Do you think there will ever be a time where, I don't want to say that those situations will never happen, because I think naturally, we live in a world where there's always going to be negative press as much as there is positive press. But do you think there's maybe anything that can be done to try and reduce the frequency of it, or maybe anything that can be done to give those people, athletes, business people alike, more of a kind of personal life where not every single thing that they do is branded out to the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it sort of gets to the heart of the ethics of social media.
Right.
Is it actually okay to thrust people into the spotlight? And I think you look at someone like Nikola Jokic, recent NBA champion,
Yeah.
totally off the platforms and seems great with that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just part of his personality. And I think that's I admire that in a way, in a sense that he's just sort of thumbed his nose at, the whole idea of trying to put everything out there and trying to be in the spotlight constantly. He lets his game do sort of all of the promotion that he wants and needs.
Right.
Um, I think, a lot of times when people find themselves in hot water, so to speak, with social media, um, it's oftentimes because what they're presenting is not truly authentic. So I think for brands, for athletes, for anyone on social media, the most important thing is to present authentically who you are. And, you know, if that's the case, then you don't oftentimes have to walk back, and go on an apology tour for something that's captured that wasn't authentically you.
100%.
So that to me is, authenticity has to sit at the center of every engagement, every piece of content that's put out into the world.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. On, I guess, a more kind of positive note, there's obviously a huge impact that the lives of athletes and the fans that follow these athletes can have, to sports businesses and entities. I think about the likes of Lionel Messi, recent example, announced that he signed into Inter Miami. Before he signed, Inter Miami had around 1 million followers, I believe it was, on Instagram. Today, the team has got 8.3 million followers. And bearing in mind that this announcement was only made a few weeks ago now, maybe a month or so, is obviously huge, right? It's taken Inter Miami to a new level. Lionel Messi aside, from a fan engagement perspective, this is generated a huge influx of what can now be classed as fans to the team. What do you think that, I guess, teams or businesses, need to do when these big moves take place and happen in order to be able to kind of keep up with the demand of the fans on these platforms? Because it's one thing going from, 50 million to 60, 70 million, but going from 1 million to 8, 9, 10 is a huge jump.
Yeah, that has been fascinating just to sort of see how all of that has unfolded. And I'll say there's a little bit of similarity, although, I think the follower growth for Miami has been just astronomical. But we've been fortunate enough with Victor Wembanyama coming
Yeah,
on board our team. Not again, Messi has had a longer tenure, certainly in the
right.
global spotlight, and has had a longer career. Wemby is at the beginning of his career. Messi has obviously had a long,
Yeah,
illustrious career, but I think there are some similarities here. And
for
and
sure.
for us, it's a few pillars that we're focused on. Again, I go back to authenticity over everything. Knowing who the brand is, knowing what you stand for, what your values are, how you define and talk about your brand, that doesn't change with the addition of any one player or coach or personality to the team. That has to be sort of the pillar that you build everything on. And it should be, for most teams and brands, the differentiator.
Yeah,
Second, so authenticity over everything, I think, is number one. The second thing I think is this is an opportunity to engage fans now, but focus on keeping them for life. You
right.
know, this is now a luxury of prioritizing key audiences for growth that will sustain your business into the future, instead of manufacturing interest that sort of appeals to the widest possible base, right? So you no longer have to sort of do stunts or, interest generating things, because the interest will organically come with this player. What we now have to do, and what I think Miami probably has to do, is focus on strategies for keeping those fans for life, and specifically prioritizing younger fans, international fans, fans who may not have already had sort of any sort of interaction with the brand.
Yeah, I
And
think
that
that's
also in turn helps, partnerships, the partnership groups,
yeah,
um, you know, go to market with a more built out story around how the brand is engaging with key audiences that are also important and appealing to partners.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I really like that second point. It's something that converting those Lionel Messi fans to Inter Miami fans, or Wembanyama fans to Spurs fans, is really the kind of key let's call it project or task of the marketing department or of the business really in general. And what that then means for the club moving forward, you take the international piece involved there. You guys at the Spurs have now got France as a demographic to be going out at, sorry, and targeting. So it unlocks a
Yeah.
lot of opportunities for the wider business as well.
Yeah. We were fortunate enough with Tony Parker and Boris Diaw to already have kind of an established fan base in France. And this, the addition of Wemby throws some gas on that fire, if you
Yeah,
will. So we're thinking about, the most effective ways to engage that international fan base and keep them as fans for life. I think there's also a tremendous amount of importance for brand marketing teams who are telling team stories and player stories to be patient. Adding new faces to any team requires a great deal of team building and chemistry building in the locker rooms of these organizations,
yeah,
and having a respect and an understanding of what the sporting operations side needs in these transitions, I think is critically important. We're fortunate enough to have obviously an incredible basketball operations group, and the conversations that we've had with that group have been so productive and helpful, just in terms of understanding each other. Hey, what do you need to get your job done of building this team, and what do we need to do our jobs with that involve building the fan base.
yeah,
So just having an understanding of both of those goals for the organization is important. And I think for us, it's also about not putting these players in a situation where we're promising anything to our fans. Our fans are obviously very excited, and I'm sure Miami's fans feel the same way. They see rings and trophies, and it's like, hold on a minute here. These teams need time to develop,
yeah,
and there is a lot of excitement, and these players are incredibly talented and capable, but we also have to just pause for a moment and realize that these are human beings taking some really, really high profile new jobs that are moving to brand new countries where, in sometimes cities that they've never even stepped foot in.
yeah.
So understanding from a human level what these people need and not just what the business needs, I think is paramount importance.
Yeah, that transition is huge, right? You think about people moving anywhere in the world, really. The personal element that's taken into account there, and the transition, and more often than not, the change in culture. There may be a new language that you need to learn. There's all of those elements taken into account, which can naturally have an effect on someone's performance, someone's energy levels. It's really a non-stop thing when you first make that move. So having that taken into account, I think for the fans especially, because you're right. I think fans hear of a Wembanyama or a Messi, and exactly that, they start thinking championships, they start thinking memorable winning teams, rather than taking the time to say, okay, cool, look, it's going to take a bit of time for us to get up and running, but I feel good, I feel positive about this. Let's be patient with it, and let's see where it lands. So I think that's a great point for people to kind of take into account and think about there.
Yeah, and fans shouldn't be rational, right? Like the whole point of a personal fandom is passion. It's
Right,
not ration, it's
right,
passion.
right.
And that, and that's why we love our fans. And that's, again, going back to like those pinch me moments of creating these opportunities for community to gather. Like, we celebrate that, but it's our responsibility as a team to have, sort of the full view, and to really know what is appropriate for the human being who's actually putting on the uniform and taking the field or
Yeah.
the pitch or the court every night, um, to pepper that into everything that we do.
Exactly, exactly. I just want to say as well, you obviously mentioned it there, Becky, but congrats on the draft pick of Wembanyama. Obviously, one of the most exciting draft, I think, in NBA history, and I'm sure a memorable day, sorry, for everyone at the Spurs. Can you give us some insight into, I guess, just the general mood and feeling from the business since the move?
Yeah, I mean, since drafting Wemby, really since lottery night when we found out that we had the first pick, it has been all gas, no brakes. I'll say, from that moment when it was announced we had the number one pick to the draft party that we put on at the AT&T Center,
Nice.
to really a whole weekend's worth of welcoming new players to the organization. It's been an amazing, amazing journey. And it is incredible to see just out in the community, like the excitement is palpable. Like
Yeah,
you can actually almost feel it and touch it.
yeah,
Fans have just gone absolutely wild. And that's, I think, San Antonio and their relationship with the Spurs is unique in professional sports. Certainly, the long run of success that this team is fortunate enough to have had created that bond, and it created a multi-generational fan base, which
yeah.
is really cool. It's really neat to see sort of, you're out in the community, and oftentimes you will see three generations of a family wearing some sort of Spurs gear. And
Incredible.
it's amazing.
Yeah,
And it's again, like just one of those things where you're like, you want to pour gas on that fire and help people feel that excitement and that energy, and you want to, stoke that passion. And you also want to say, like, hold on a minute, guys, like, next season is going to be amazing. But we're not promising anything. And it does take time to develop and grow as a team.
yeah,
And oftentimes patience is important in that.
yeah, no doubt. And I guess last question I'll leave you with there, Becky. What's next for the Spurs? What else have the fans got to look forward to besides obviously this amazing draft pick?
Yeah, we have a lot of exciting things that we're working on for the upcoming season. Certainly, the debut of our new rookies is going to be exciting. We'll have an open scrimmage leading up to the tip off of the
Nice.
season where fans can come into the building and actually see Wemby for the first time. That'll be very exciting. Obviously, opening night will take on different importance this season. Um, and next season, we're actually piloting a fan membership program. So we're taking a little bit of a different approach to this, using the theory that what sports brings to the table is indeed connection and a gathering point for people. We're going to test it in a handful of markets next season, to do more of a localized fan club model with the team sitting at the center of that fan club. This happens organically all the time. And I think global football does this arguably better than domestic teams here do it. So we're going to take what we've learned from talking to our cohorts and peers in global football and apply that to a test and see if there's, see if this is a sustainable model for us to continue to grow. But I'm really excited about that. One, because it will give fans a deeper, closer connection to the team in a team enabled way.
Yeah,
And two, because just again, like it is why I do what I do. I believe in the power of sport to bring people together. And I think, to expand and grow on that will be a lot of fun.
yeah, for sure. Innovation at its finest. Love it. And no one better, I guess, to be leading the project than yourself, Becky, for sure. So looking forward to hearing and learning more about that as and when that kicks off. So brilliant, Becky. It's been a pleasure having you on. Really, really enjoyed our conversation today. For those who are interested in learning more about Becky or I guess San Antonio Spurs and potential opportunities within the business, feel free to reach out. She's a great person, great executive, and obviously very good at what she does. So I'm sure Becky would be open to any of those kind of conversations as well.
Always happy to connect with anybody in the industry or looking to get into the industry. Find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks everyone for listening. Been a great session today. Looking forward to next week's episode. See you then.